Moving on to page 18 is a story of mine which I'm afraid is going to upset and infuriate a lot of our regular listeners and viewers, which is the leaked result of a medal review that was ordered by Boris Johnson when he was in office into the case of recognition for the survivors of Britain's Cold War radiation experiments. I shouldn't say just the survivors, actually, because it would be posthumous as well. Now, Boris said he thought there should be a medal. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, on their race to number 10, both backed it as well. But a Cabinet Office source has told me that the medal committee, which decides these things, has nevertheless rejected it. Now, that committee refuses to release its verdict or its details of its discussions, so we don't know why at this stage, Alison, that it's done that. The source told me he has no idea how this has happened and thinks it's an absolute disgrace, which is why it's leaked. But it just beggars belief, doesn't it? If the last three prime ministers all want something to happen, what on earth could stop someone in Whitehall acting on it?
Well, I mean, I think that's the interesting question, isn't it, at the heart of all this? What is it and why is it that they are just insistent on never, ever giving these people and their families any form of justice? And I think, I mean, gosh, Susie and people that are watching this morning who are families of nuclear test veterans will know better than anyone about the kind of the highs and lows that have been in this campaign over the years. And sometimes it thinks, yes, we're getting somewhere. I mean, particularly at a point where you've got the only two contenders for the next prime minister are both committing to it, you think, oh, that's got to be in the bag. And then the next thing is these sort of secretive, I was going to say shady forces within the establishment who suddenly put a blocker on it all again.
It's that kind of thing where people think, oh, you know, you talk about shady stuff and this, that, and the other, and the conspiracies, and it can't possibly be, and that is ridiculous. But yet, all the stuff, and I'm a realistic human being, but all the stuff I've uncovered over the years does make me think that is exactly what's happening. There are
some reason why they will not hold their hands up to any kind of, I was going to say admission of guilt, really. But even though, interestingly, of course, the evidence they had came from their own reports, didn't it? That actually this had caused cancers, or in what was the number? Is it 377% people who served as within those tests were 377% more likely to have a form of cancer, which is just, that is not a coincidence, is it?
No, exactly. Now, so what happened after we met Boris Johnson in June, we were invited to make fresh medal applications. The British Nuclear Test Veterans Association, I think, relied on previous applications. The Lab Rats campaign group made a fresh one. And the Lab Rats application involved evidence from a government study into the long-term health of veterans, which has found for years that there's nothing wrong and everything's fine, don't look at this, it's okay. But this time, in February, they finally said, yes, they are in the long term more likely to die than other servicemen. They are more likely to die from cancer. And one of the cancers they'll get is a kind of blood cancer called chronic myeloid leukemia, of which they have a 377% increased risk of dying from that. And it is known to be radiogenic, in that if you are exposed to radiation, you're more likely to get it and you're more likely to die from it. But that goes against, you know, we thought if you've got the government's own study and the Prime Minister backing it and the successive prime ministers, that you can't possibly argue, as that committee has done before.
Also, it's not like the veterans or ourselves are really asking for that much anymore. We're not asking for gazillions of pounds of compensation. We're not asking. All we're asking for is a medal which gives recognition to those men who unknowingly flew aircrafts or were on the ground when nuclear material was being around them, and have suffered with their health and their family's health ever since. So that's not even a big ask. So why will they not do anything?
Because I think probably because it's the smallest ask and they see it as the thin end of a wedge. Now, get into the questions, comments, everybody. Ask us your questions. What do you think about why the government's ignoring the test veterans? What do you think about Lord Lucan's possible doppelganger or actual him being found in Australia? Now, Susan says, you're both very right. We've been treated with the utmost contempt. The veterans deserve a medal. Like you say, Alison, it's the cheapest thing in the world to give a medal. There are lots of veterans who don't want one, who'd find it offensive almost. They want an apology and anything else.
And I see Mike Holden here has made a very good point, is that, I mean, obviously this is what's behind it. They don't want to give the medal because if they give the medal, that would be an admission that something happened that shouldn't have happened, an admission of guilt. And so they're obviously concerned about what could happen next. But other countries have managed it, haven't they, Susie, to give a medal?
Yeah, and indeed New Zealand, our own Queen, gave New Zealand's medal because the New Zealand government asked her to. And other nuclear powers around the world all offer some form of recognition. Now, the point that Mike makes there about it being an admission of guilt, in a sense, you're right. But, when my granddad got a medal for going across northwestern Europe after D-Day, he was at risk. He wasn't being shot at every single day. I mean, quite a lot of them. But, it wasn't a wrong thing for him to do. He would have said that they needed to fight that war, and he got medals as a result. And you could have exactly the same argument with the nuclear test veterans. Many of them have said to me over the years, we needed nuclear deterrent. We needed to do it. We're under constant fear of a Soviet invasion, and it's keeping us safe right now today from the likes of Putin. So again, you can just say, look, it was dangerous because the nuclear bomb could have gone wrong, and give them a medal. It doesn't mean you have to compensate them, does it?
There's one line that leaves me with like a tiny little shred of hope, which is the last line of the story today, which is a spokesman for the Cabinet Office said, the case is still being considered. We owe a debt of gratitude to all veterans. Now, I mean, that's a fairly sort of bland statement for them, but it does leave the door open that should they even at this very last minute want to change their minds, they could perhaps still do it, do you think?
Yeah. Now, I don't think I could really read out Susan's message because it's being too nice to me. But thank you very much, Susan. But journalistically, I probably shouldn't. Judith says, absolutely disgusting. This medal isn't being given. Now, Alison's right. There is a faint chink of hope, and that is that this committee, which made the decision, is a subcommittee. It's the one that deals with military medals, but it reports up to the main committee known as the Honours and Decorations Committee, or HD Committee. And that committee has on it representatives of the Prime Minister and the King. And it is possible, and it has happened before, when those two people want a medal or agree there should be one, that HD Committee overrules what the subcommittee says. So that could still happen. We know that committee's met, but it hasn't made its decision yet. And they can do a huge amount to swing this back around if the King and the Prime Minister decided they wanted to. But, Alison, it was reported in the Times, I think, over the weekend, that Rishi and his team are reconsidering every single one of his campaign pledges, even the simple, easy, cheap ones like this, which will include his support for the medal because of the fresh cutbacks he's planning. Do you think we might lose the medal because suddenly we can't afford the tin?
Well, it's a very easy get out for him on all sorts of things, that line, isn't it? Because obviously we all know that we're in a cost of living crisis. We all know that there's going to be some very difficult things happening over the next few days. And so next Thursday, we've got the autumn statement. And that is grim. However, the difficultness of this situation is allowing Rishi Sunak, our new Prime Minister, to essentially rip up any commitment he's ever made and just say, oh, do you know what, I'm starting all again. It's a completely different landscape. Didn't know it was going to be this difficult, and he can start again. So, as you say, something that really has got absolutely no cost really attached to it at all, such as this, could be a full victim to it. However, he's still got to stand for something. He's still got to believe in something, and you would like to hope that something like this, which feels like a relatively easy win, because the general public, I think, have got a great sense of right and wrong, and they feel that this is the right thing to do. You would imagine it's the sort of thing that perhaps could persuade him.
Yeah, well, you'd think probably that when they do reconsider all his pledges, this is one of the ones he would think, well, that's a nice headline in the Daily Mirror. I should probably do this. It cost us too much. But unfortunately, while he's spending months chewing over all the other stuff he's got to spit out and undigest, there are veterans dying every single week without the recognition and honour of their government, which they deserve. So, Rishi, if you're watching, or anyone in his team, I'm sure they.
I've heard that he watches this every morning, Susie. So I'm sure.
Yeah, they're right now, COP27, watching us. Get on with it, sunshine, is what we will say. Otherwise, we're coming after you. Right, I think we've got one more question to answer before we toodle off. Lynette says, my uncle is one of those test veterans, and his son, and
yeah.
Oh, Lynette.
I know. And it's
son and daughter all have cancer in one form or another. He was serving in the army, so why shouldn't he get a medal?
I don't know. I don't know, Lynette, and I'm so sorry, to your family and to all those families, and to you, Susie, who've fought so long and hard for this.
It's hearing things like that, though. That's why I'm upset, because someone comes along and says very matter-of-factly, my uncle served his country, him and both his children have a form of cancer. Now, without knowing what those cancers are, it's difficult to know if they're all radiogenic or somehow affected, like to be affected by it. But there are families who are suffering, not only having to deal with cancer, very high rates in one family. That is unusual. That is unusual for a father and both children to have it. And they're having to deal with the pressure and the uncertainty of not knowing if it's linked, because the science on that has never been done. They've got the science that has been done being denied by the government and ignored. And on top of that, they've got all this just general denial and mistrust of authority in the establishment. And I'm so cross that it still goes on, because there's no...
I know, because now you can, well, not understand, but you can sort of understand why there was a cover-up and all that misinformation back in the 50s and the 60s. But there's no reason why it should be like that now, is there? There's no reason for just not being straight and putting your hands up when something like that's gone on.
The entire reason why we are worried about Vladimir Putin firing even a tactical nuke, why Liz Truss apparently spent every day in office looking at the prevailing wind conditions, is because we know that even a small amount of radiation causes incredible damage. We know that uranium isotopes only get half as bad after 4.5 billion years. That's why it's a weapon. And to say that the men closest to it weren't hurt by it is...
Well, it's just not true, is it? It's just not true.
I can tell you what it is, Alison, but it's a family show and Facebook will ban if we say it. But it's just tripe. It's obviously tripe. Anyway, thank you, Lynette, for sharing your story with us. Thank you, Ed, backstage, for making me cry. Well done.